Hello and welcome to WomanVision TV. It's where women talk. I'm your host, Nadia Giordana, and my guest today is Linda D. Hutchinson. She's the author of Laugh Yourself Happy, Kids Say Delightful Things. She also bills herself as a corporate fun organizer. We're here today talking about laughter as medicine and the myriad ways we can improve our physical and mental well-being by incorporating it into our lives. Welcome, Linda.
Hi, Nadia.
I'm so glad you could be here today.
Me too. Me too. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, that's so great. Well, I guess you could say that you are in the business of laughter in more than one way. Tell me about who you are and what you do and why.
Oh, good questions. Who am I? I've been working on that forever. But I think of myself more as a humor educator. And I love teaching people about the power and possibility of humor. And I do that through workshops, but also through writing. And sometimes people will call me and they're looking for a stand-up comedian. And I'm not that. And when Marilyn Belgum was alive, I like to refer them to her.
Okay.
Because she was so delightful. And she gave me my first boa. And now I use this to play with props. But it gets warm.
They are warm, aren't they?
Yes. They are.
Yeah.
But she gave me permission to let people know about her humor. And one year she spoke in front of 2,000 women in Milwaukee. And she came back to Minneapolis and reported that she got a standing ovulation.
I can see where she'd be a lot of fun.
She was, yeah. So.
Well, I personally believe that having a sense of humor and taking joy in our daily lives has got to be one of the healthiest things that we can do for ourselves, any one of us. What can anyone like you or me or anyone watching do to begin to incorporate humor into their daily lives?
I've compiled lots of ideas over the years, and I like to promote giving the gift of humor. And that could be in many different forms. You know, if people like to read, you give them a book. You know, I came up with the idea of a humor basket. Which is wonderful when somebody's not feeling well. Like my friend Judy had cancer, and I knew Judy's humor. So I could tailor the humor basket, and then she could use it when she felt like it.
They say laughter is good for illness.
It is, it is. But, you know, we want to respect that there are times when they won't want it. And so in the form of a basket, then she could use it when she felt like it. You know, and I put big glasses, different glasses. She was an animal fan, so I had a stuffed animal. I put a Wild America baby animal DVD, you know, and so it's nice when you know what makes people laugh. So I like to urge people to find out and ask the question, what makes you laugh? So what makes you laugh, Nadia? Oh gosh,
I think like in your book, the funny things that kids say, because it comes out of pure innocence, those things make me laugh. And I have sometimes an oddball sense of humor. I'll laugh at things that no one else is laughing at. And I don't know when they're going to creep up on me, and it's like, oh my gosh, that is just so funny. So it's different all the time.
It's funny how we need permission to be ourselves and laugh at what we think is funny.
Give me an example of how to use humor to diffuse like a tense situation.
My belief is that one of the reasons we run into tense situations is we have to be right. So I think a lot of tension comes from, you know, I have to be right. And if I can laugh at myself about that, you know, my son and I would joke around, we'd catch ourselves in the right and wrong game, and then it was like, okay, it's your turn to be right today, but it will be my turn tomorrow. You know, to play with the tension. The other thing that I preach is don't be offended even if it's intended.
Oh, that's a tough one.
And that's, you know, that's about humor, but it's also about life.
Yeah.
And when I put that into practice, and I'm not going to say that I do it all the time, but when I put that into practice, I'm more serene.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I don't, you know, 90% of the time I doubt that people are really trying to offend me.
Yeah.
You know.
Most of the time they're not.
Right.
Yeah. Most of the time I think you find that people say things without thinking, and it really wasn't intended to hurt your feelings.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, talk about appropriate humor, and you mentioned something about inappropriate seriousness. I'm curious about that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that we have all these rules about humor and what's okay and what's not. And I think that's healthy. I mean, we need to pay attention.
In certain realms, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And again, not to offend people. And
not at the expense
exactly.
of someone else. Sure.
Exactly. And inappropriate seriousness, I actually think we're more guilty of that. When you think of all the benefits of humor, you know, health, learning, creativity, relationships, you know, I have this belief that laughter and play are two of the most abundant, renewable resources we underutilize.
Renewable. I never thought of it like that, but it is.
It is.
Yes.
And so I want to promote the healing power of humor, and that's in relationships, it's in our body, it's all over.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, not to curb that if we can avoid it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you say that humor can be used to create a greater sense of team. How so? And when you're teaching, you use games and experiential activities for team building, and I'm wondering if you could demonstrate something along those lines.
Well, I could describe, I mean, I could throw something at you, Nadia.
That might not work.
Right. But there's an activity, my favorite, is called group juggle. And so if you can envision a circle and you get a pattern down, like I'll have soft footballs and soft stuffed animals, and the group gets a pattern down and they're always tossing to the same person, and then they see how many they can juggle as a group. And then we debrief it, you know, what worked. And it'll be things like communication. You have to adapt. There'll be some collisions in the air as one animal collides with another one. And so people learn to adapt. And so there are all these points that have to do with team building. And one of the points that doesn't come up very often that I like to promote, like if we were in the circle and I was throwing to you, did I take responsibility for you getting it, or was I just getting it off my plate?
Yeah.
You know, imagine a workplace where everybody is out to have everybody else win.
Yeah.
You know, we're still working on that.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the kinds of points that, you know, I want people to use humor for that reason too. And there is a lot of laughter and play from the games. And that's what I love. I love to hear people laughing. And if they learn and laugh at the same time, all the better.
So you can get people doing something physical, but it also incorporates that communication and why and what's going on with what we're doing. I can see where that would help with team building and also breaking the ice.
Exactly.
That would be like a very good icebreaker kind of thing too, especially in a corporate situation, but maybe even at a seminar or something like that.
Well, and it calls forth, the laughter also calls forth creativity.
Yeah.
You know, John Cleese, for people
I love him.
And he said, you know, he does training videos as well.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and he says that laughter and play are two of the fastest ways to creative thinking. So that can make a difference with teams as well.
That's new to me, so that's good to know. Well, now you deliver programs on using humor to teach cultural awareness, and you refer to something called cultural humor and humility. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
You know, I think that we get nervous. You know, we want to be so politically correct. And again, that's good.
And we begin to worry about that.
Right, and then we don't use the resource of humor. And so I like to encourage people to ask, what makes you laugh?
Yeah.
And is there a particular kind of humor in your culture? You know, I met a young man from Turkey.
Yeah.
And so I asked him if there was, I mean, I love it because I'm learning new sources of humor. Mm-hmm. So I asked him about his humor and the humor in his culture. And he referred me to Nasruddin, who is a Sufi mystic and a storyteller. All right. And I found a couple of books, and you know, I love this story. It's a teaching, storytelling type of humor. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And many cultures are more storytelling than they are joke telling.
And yeah, and storytelling is a good way to bring in jokes and humor, but it's a larger picture when you're using storytelling, isn't it?
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's from life, where often, well, first of all, only 10% of laughter comes from jokes. Okay. And I like to encourage people to use the other 90%. Yeah. You know, and jokes is that's where we get in trouble too often. Yeah, yeah. Where when we're sharing from our lives, or the stories of children, or the joy of pets. Yeah. You know, I appreciate that you seem to have an understanding that it's not about jokes, it's more about being lighthearted. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is, isn't it? It is. Yeah, and even that joy in just the not so much laughable things in the life around us and the things that are going on around us, but the joy and the feel good, and yeah, this is good, this feels great, this is a good day, mm-hmm. and isn't this fun, and it's a fun, has a wide range when you think of fun that way. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's great. Yeah. Well, you have a book, Laugh Yourself Happy, Kids Say Delightful Things, and this was published just last month, I believe. Exactly. And what's the story behind how it all came about? Well, quite often I will ask people to share something about their humor, or what makes them laugh. Love your cover, by the way. The little girl with the red clown nose. It's so cute. I love that too. Yeah. Well, I will ask people what makes them laugh, mm-hmm. and probably the number one answer is children. It really is. I can see where it would be. Sure. Right. Pets are second. Come in second. Yeah. And other people, but again, there's just when you ask that question of a mom or a grandma, mm-hmm. and they say their child or grandchild, and then you invite them to elaborate. Yeah. You know, tell me a story, mm-hmm. and you can just see they light up. Mm-hmm. And so, even if you had to be there, I love to hear those stories. So, you know, the kind of one of the funny things that I see on TV a lot that does not make me laugh, makes me wince, that I'm uncomfortable about, is the series of, I call them pratfalls, but pratfalls are deliberate and funny, but where people fall and it looks like they got hurt. That doesn't make me laugh. No, it makes me wince. I'm, oh no, don't show me that. So I don't watch that particular program. There's a couple of them. Right. But they do have some real funny things in there, mm-hmm. some other funny things. But when I'm positive that person got hurt, then mm-hmm. I don't think it's so funny. Right. And you can catch the other funny stuff on YouTube. Yes. Because the laughing babies are, I love to refer people to the laughing babies. Yeah. I browse YouTube from time to time just for funny stuff. Mm-hmm. And I like to encourage people there are still a few people who aren't on the computer. Yes. You know, and not as many now, but. Right, to share those funny things with them. Mm-hmm. You know, people have laptops, and when you go visit your grandma, I have a 95-year-old mother, and, you know, to share that fun stuff with her. Oh, yeah. A treat. Yeah. Well, is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to talk about? Well, I realize when you ask me about cultural humor and humility, mm-hmm. I believe that humility is the key to humor. Mm-hmm. And that's... How so? If I think I'm better than you, we're probably not going to laugh much together. Oh. Okay. If I think I'm less than you, we're not going to laugh much together. Probably not going to laugh as much together. Sure. And so humor can be used to build those bonds, mm-hmm. and again, to, you know, create positive relationships across gender and culture and age, you know. You know, you touched on something I never thought of before, but you're right. Laughing together
in a group where everybody's laughing outwardly, that's different. But one-on-one, laughing together really demands a sense of equality, doesn't it? Right. Camaraderie.
Right, and trust.
Yeah, it has to be trust, because depending on what you're laughing about and where and what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Well, now, in the time we have left, would you like to either read from your book or tell us a couple of funny anecdotes?
I would love to. It's one of my favorite things.
Okay.
In the process of writing the book, I found a daycare center that was collecting one-liners in Northfield, Minnesota, and they actually published a couple of books that are no longer in print. And they gave me permission, and 3 of my favorite one-liners, this little girl, probably 4 years old, says, "If I have a baby, I hope it's just a doll."
See, that makes you laugh instantly. I hope it's just a doll. Yeah.
And then, and they're masters at wordplay without knowing it.
Yes, they are.
And this other little person said, "I was scared out of my nitwits." And my favorite, this little guy said, "I think this pee in my pants is not mine."
Oh, funny.
You know, we start very young. I didn't do it.
Yes.
I didn't do it.
That seems to be, you know, they talk about human nature, but that sense of lying or denying is kind of inborn in us as human beings, because they do start at so young that you almost think they didn't learn it from anywhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that makes it funny.
It is.
That's what makes it funny, because their attempt to fool us, the big people, is hilarious.
Do you have time for it?
Hello and welcome to my kitchen. Tonight is New Year's Eve and I'm making oyster stew. This was a family favorite when I was growing up. My father loved it. My mother didn't care for it so much. She would just sip the broth. But what's interesting about that is it doesn't sound much like a Minnesota kind of food or tradition. And I really don't know where it came from or how it came up through Iowa and then Minnesota, because our family came originally from Iowa, and I think my father's family in Iowa first, for us, started serving oyster stew. We served it in Minnesota, and so did several other families that lived in the central Minnesota area that we did. So for whatever that's worth, oyster stew is what I'm making tonight, and I haven't made it in a long time. I printed off a quick recipe, but this is exactly the way my mother made it. I'll be using canned oysters. We didn't have fresh when I was growing up. You could use fresh. This is an 8-ounce can of fresh oysters. So let's get started. I will heat up this pan and get it going. I have a quarter of a cup of butter. Now I'm making a small batch. It's just my husband and myself at home here tonight, so we don't need a large batch of soup. This will maybe make 2 or 3 large bowls, a few cups of soup to use, and I think that's the best way it should be served, as an appetizer soup or first course soup. So let's get this heating up. This is heating up quickly. And just turn it down just a little. Melt that just ever so much more. And I have a half a cup of finely chopped celery and a couple of tablespoons of finely chopped onion. Nothing too complicated. And we will cook these until they're getting tender. This may take a minute or two. I think this is ready. Now I'm going to put the oysters and their liqueur into the pot. Ooh, those are nice big ones. And we'll heat this up. This soup doesn't take very long. Might put a little bit of salt, fresh ground black pepper. You could use white pepper, it might be nice for this soup. We never had that on the farm. Get this so that they are heated through. Just until the oysters start curling around the edges, the little black edges start to curl. Actually, that's really only true if you're using fresh oysters. But I can see here now the liqueur has mixed with the butter, and the juice in here now is getting a little milkier looking, and that's the way this should look. Okay, then I'll use a pint of half and half. Pour this in here. Now we'll turn this down. I don't really want to boil this. I just want to get it hot and let the flavors marry. You do want the soup to be piping hot when you serve it. Now, I maybe would add a tablespoon of chopped parsley. I think I'll do that right before I serve. It's a very, very simple soup. Now let's take a look at these soups. I might like to just tap a little bit of paprika. Just for a little bit of color. Something green. And oyster crackers are commonly used on the farm. Our family used saltines. What I'm doing today are some handmade croutons. They look lovely. And if you're gluten-free, no worries. Why don't you try some of these gluten-free? They're called, I think the brand name is G-Free, crispy pretzels. They are wonderful in this soup. Happy New Year.